afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to a program today where we continue our Superpower series. Today's is Superpower number 2, Focus. Focus, no peace. With a speaker, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk. We have close to 10 members on Zoom and close to 5 members on Facebook. People are dialing in. I have got Shweka helping me out in managing social media today. Good afternoon, Vaish. Welcome back to another episode of Success Sadhana.
Thank you so much, Jam. I'm really happy to be back here. And the topic today is something that is relevant because there are a lot of distractions around nowadays. Don't you find that?
Always.
One of the
Constant.
distractions I've noticed is that there are a lot of lights that try to catch our attention. Nowadays, billboards are lit up, and in our personal environment, there's lots of little lights here and there. And what to speak of screens, they've become so much part of our life, and they seem to be an endless way to distract oneself. So today we'll be talking about the principle of focusing the lens of the mind and the ways in which we can do that, and also the benefit of doing that because we can. That's why there are so many instructions about it. And just letting the mind go is a recipe for misery, because left to its own devices without being trained or helped in some way, the mind tends to spiral into various regions that are not helpful to us, but actually can be a cause of great consternation. So we come with one mind. That is, we get a mind, we have a mind, we have one mind, we have to take care of it. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says in the chapter on yoga and meditation that the mind can be the best friend or it can become the worst enemy. Has anybody ever had a situation where the mind seemed friendly or not so friendly? And if so, what kind of things did the mind tell you when it was friendly? You can use the chat box. Or maybe it's easier to say the times when it was unfriendly. Like I've had experience with my mind saying that, oh, you can't do that. Have you ever had that? You won't be able to do that. And then I try anyway, and then I'm able to do it. And I say, what were you talking about? Or sometimes, oh, there, Rebecca, thank you, said, my mind can be unfriendly when it tells me I'm not good enough. That's a very common one. Yeah, the mind can say I'm not good enough. And the other day, I was about to do something, and there was my mind had a sense of fear that, well, what's going to happen when you do this? And I said, well, I'll just do it anyway. And I overcame the mind. I just said, I have to do my duty, so I'm going to do it. And when I did it, it came out completely different from what my mind told me. I've heard some people say that the things we worry about only actually manifest a small fraction of the time. And when we're able to overcome the mind and actually do our duty instead of trying to follow the mind's whims, which is called manodharma. Everyone knows what dharma means. It's the path of balance and righteousness in the world. And when we follow the mind, we're taken more on a whimsical path, and we're not following a North Star. The mind is also known as chanchala. Chanchala means like a child acts when he or she comes into a room when there's a serious conversation going on. They might be running around or moving from one seat to the next and so on. So the mind is called chanchala. It's also called dridham, which means very determined. And also there's another term which says that the mind is mad or crazy. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asks his teacher, Krishna, how do I overcome the turbulent mind it seems impossible. He said, like, how could I control the wind, right? He says. And Krishna answers that if you practice at it, then you can bring it to a peaceful state. And when we're in a peaceful state, we're actually happy. There's happiness because we can see who we are beyond the churnings of the mind, which actually kind of show us sometimes a movie that is not so pleasant. And if we get absorbed in that, then we get carried away. So what did Mark say?
Mark said, my mind cannot stop repeating old stuff.
Yeah, repeating old stuff. Like there's a word resentment. And if you look at the word resent, it says resent. So resentment means you keep resending the same bad experience you had with somebody. Somebody says something to you, so you keep saying it. Your mind keeps saying it to you over and over again. A resent. So I'm resenting or resending it again and again. What else there, JM?
Rebecca says, my mind will trick me into thinking it's okay to do things I know I shouldn't do, like eating a lot of sugary treats.
Yeah. And so there's ways to overcome that. Krishna talks about that in the Bhagavad Gita. There's thinking, getting in a mindset of, there's two options. One's called Shreyas and the other's called Preyas. So Preyas means what's ultimately good, or excuse me, it's the other way around. Shreyas means what's ultimately good for me, and Preyas means what seems to be good right now. So yeah, if we get into that perspective of how I'll be happy later on by controlling the mind, that's kind of nice too. Oh, one from Wisam.
Yeah, Wisam says depression is a case when all brain message are negative.
Oh, that's very can be very destructive, actually.
Wisam just came on mute. Wisam, did you have something more to add?
No, I muted myself early on, but you started reading the messages, so I forgot to unmute myself. Yeah, I wrote my message there. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Anna has something to say, though.
Anna, go ahead.
Not exactly, just setting my new computer. So
okay, well, it's good to see you. I'm glad you got a new computer. You look
yes,
great.
thank you.
Okay, all right, thanks. Oh, Gokul is here, and he said, my mind is vulnerable to others' opinions around me, making me continually sway away from my determined path. Aha, yeah, that happens so much. And Mark, good to see you.
Thanks. I was also remembering a quote that I heard once where it goes, a well-trained mind runs to God. And sometimes I remember that. And it's like, yeah, my mind also reminds me when I need God, I will turn. When I need Krishna, I will turn. And my mind is doing that as well.
Yeah, otherwise it often waits until you're in a foxhole somewhere. Because this is a time when people generally start thinking in larger terms rather than the immediate sense gratification or just worrying about life. They think in existential terms. Yeah, nice. Well, JM, let's show a few slides because I have quite a few here today. And embedded in the slides, there's a chance where we can do a little guided meditation. How's that sound? Let's try it out. So this sense of focus, actually, the mind, when it's in a higher modality, it expands when we focus. And when we're distracted, it tends to contract. And so the teachings of the Yoga Sutras and meditation and Bhagavad Gita are just to have a one-pointed mind. It's said in the Gita, Vyavasayatmika buddhir ekeha kurunandana. Ek means one. So ekeha kurunandana, teacher is recommending that be one-pointed in your intelligence. He says to Arjuna, he continues, Bahu shaka hirantascha, that if you don't have a single point to focus on, then your mind tends to be many branched and it'll go in many different directions. Bahu shaka yananta shat. Ananta means unlimited, unlimited ways the mind can go. So bringing it to this point of focus on especially what's most important. Okay, let's see. What more? We do have the power to focus, and this is kind of obvious because there's so many of the wisdom literatures that advise, please focus the mind, learn how to do it, practice how to do it. If it wasn't possible, then they wouldn't actually mention it. And we are different from matter. The eyes that we have on our head are just lenses. And we, as conscious entities, have the ability to focus on our main asset. We can decide I should say, it is our main asset, and we can also decide what our main asset is in life and bring more focus to it. It's a matter of practice. So the principle is to know what your priorities are and to keep your mind focused in that direction. It's like a pilot flying from one coast to the next has a theoretical straight line, and he or she is always pulling back to that line because it's impossible to be on it completely all the time. But when we know where it is, we can pull back to it. So this sense of focus in our lives is also very important for getting where we want to go. Otherwise, we get distracted. Interesting word, distraction, also, because there's attraction and distraction. We lose our focus on what's most appealing, actually, to us ultimately. So this is one of the mantras someone gave me many years ago, and it's so practical. It's something you can ask yourself throughout the day, or that you can remind yourself when you ask where I want to go. Where your attention goes, your energy flows. So we project ourselves in various ways, and when we focus on a particular thing, then we enter into it. If you focus on a worry, you can escalate that worry very quickly. If you focus on going somewhere and you start thinking about it, cultivating knowledge about it, then you'll be able to go there. Any direction you want to go. That's the beauty of being a conscious being. We're actually free to move anywhere we want to move. And one of the points that's made in the wisdom literatures is that we've forgotten how free we are, and we get captured by the mind. We stay in this tiny little universe in our skull, but actually we can move in any direction we want by cultivation and by learning to point our attention in that direction. So if you want to know where you're going, just notice where you're placing your attention. So let's try an experiment for a moment. This is the desire tree. And so if you'll just sit up like that person who's sitting under that tree. By the way, that tree is called a Kalpavriksha tree. So that tree fulfills any desire you may have. Once you sit under it and then you identify what your desire is, then the tree will make all arrangements to fulfill that desire. So now let's do this meditation. Sit up a little straighter than you were a few minutes ago and close your eyes. And breathe. And as your eyes are closed, your spine is slightly straightened and you're alert. You can exhale and then inhale to the count of 7 through your nose. And then hold your breath for the count of 8. And when you're ready, exhale through your mouth for the count of 4. Let's try that one more time. Inhale to the count of 8. Hold for the count of 7. And exhale through your mouth the count of 4. And then just breathe normally. You've been on a long trek to approach the Kalpavriksha, this mystical tree that fulfills all desires, and you're only one there. There's a carpet of soft grass underneath the tree, and you sit down comfortably, just as you are now, and you're breathing, but you bring your awareness inwardly and become aware that you're conscious and that you can direct your attention any way that you want to. You have that freedom at any second to decide to move your awareness from your feet to your head. And now be aware that you have desires. There's something that you want. Maybe many things that you want. As you're aware that you're sitting under this Kalpavriksha tree that will fulfill any one desire that you most cherish, decide what that is. What do you most want more than any other thing? Pull that one thing out of the myriad other desires that may be churning in your mind. And as if it were a flower, then hold it up as an offering and show it to the tree. That this is the one thing that's most important to you in your whole life. And now put that flower in your pocket as a reminder. And having achieved our mission, we'll now chant 3 mantras before we make the trek back out from the top of the mountain where the tree is located. Chant Nitai Gauranga. You can follow along with me. Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga. Now you can wiggle your fingers, rub your hands together a little bit, open your eyes and come back into the room. And we're back. We made a long journey up to the mountain, sat under a tree. And we noticed that we're conscious, and therefore we can point our attention where we wish. We're free to do that to some degree. And so keep that flower, that one desire that you picked out from all the other desires that you might have. And we'll come back to it in a little while. We're going to continue with a few slides that'll explain why that's so important. So the mind has two paths. One is bound and the other is free. This is according to the literatures on meditation and yoga. We call KPM, or the karmically prompted mind, versus the deliberately engaged mind, or DEM. So these are two paths that the mind can take. We're either pushed or impelled by our previous karma. The mind is a subtle instrument and it gets influenced, or we can train the mind by deliberation. We can deliberately engage the mind and point it in a beneficial direction. So here's what it means by a karmically prompted mind. Karma is action forced by material consciousness. Material consciousness, there are ways that we associate with the physical world, and we have our experiences, and then we have likes and dislikes that get programmed into our subconscious. These are called samskars. So when we come to make a decision, do I like this? Do I like pears, or I don't like pears? And then I say, oh, I don't like pears because I have that samskar, that impression previously. Something happened when I ate a pear. Maybe I fell from a tree and I no longer like pears. So there's this sense of a predisposition against pears. And KPM, action prompted by karmic momentum and urges. So there's a development by our association with the material nature as spiritual beings. We associate with the material nature in various ways, and therefore we have this sense of being pushed. And we have a kind of momentum even as we come into this life, and we have certain urges, which we can decide to give into or not. We can curb those urges in various ways and learn to discipline and go in other ways. And I'm talking about militant discipline where we become morose and withered in life, but actually they're very sanguine opportunities and alternatives, ways to get a higher taste for things that are actually much more enriching. And we can engage in those rather than just giving in to the base urges. So let's see the next slide, which talks about deliberately engaged mind. So, of course, to come to being deliberate, one has to deliberate and find out what's best for me. And that's kind of what we did in that experiment of looking for the desire, which is the best desire that we might have. And so when we're able to deliberately engage the mind, it's called akarma. It means we're not bound by karma. It's not pushing us. So it's action prompted by spiritually guided intelligence. So when we develop our intelligence, which is said to be the adult in the room, the mind can become unruly like a little child, and the mind can be ruled by the intelligence if we cultivate it properly. And DEM actually means action taken under good guidance and after deliberation, guided by a purified mind. So that purified mind, given that has good direction, it takes us in the right way. And the mind that's karmically driven, we just give into impulse. It takes us in random ways that aren't necessarily good for us. Let's just go to the next slide. But before we go into these videos. We have 2 major motion pictures to show you today by popular demand because the movie was so well accepted last week. The difference between the karmically driven mind or the one where we're deliberate about which way we go, if that resonates with anybody. And I'd also like to hear about your experience in sitting under that tree. What feelings did you have going into that? What reaction did you have to the guided meditation? Any kind of reflections you have from that experiment? Let's talk about it for a minute. It's like a
Marilia,
talk
please.
show, so everyone's got to talk.
Marilia, please go ahead. I don't know if you're double muted, Marilia, we can't hear you. I do see you coming off mute.
I didn't want to interrupt anyone, so I was pausing and waiting.
Okay.
But
I think till Marilia comes back online, Shubha, please go ahead.
so thank you. This is another one of those wonderful, very insightful times as I listen to you. You know, for me, it was a very, very wonderful experience of actual focus. I find during the day that even though I start my day with a spiritually guided mind, that I tend to get distracted. This is so apt for today's topic with the myriads of things that call and demand my attention. But taking that few moments to sit under that tree and really reflect on who I really am brought me back into focus and really gave me some deeper insights into myself. And it's amazing. We just did it for a few minutes, and it was such a beneficial experience.
Oh, thank you very much, Shubha, for your reflections. Very helpful as usual. Yeah, and that picture was so mystical. Just the silhouette of the tree and somebody sitting under it, and what it represents. How we're here in this world, and actually, there is a way that we can move forward with determination. We're not relegated to simply being controlled by the mind and our urges. This is kind of the image of somebody sitting there like that. Oftentimes we see images of the Buddha who's sitting under a tree like that, who was so determined, said, I'm going to find out actually what's beyond just all these urges and what's beyond the mind and what's beyond the regular course in the material world. Looks like more coming in the chat, right, JM?
Yeah, we had Marilia, I think she pasted on chat. It felt very calming, soothing, and felt my mind, body, and spirit align. It took me away from the world for a moment and helped me to realize that I am under a constant go, and how healing it could be to just pause and align for a moment.
Wow, nice points. And it doesn't take much, does it? Because we're always right here. And the reason that I feel an anxiety is because I start holding on to the whirlwind of the mind and getting pulled here and there. But if I come back and remember, I'm the one who's observing it. That's just going on around me, but I'm never affected by it. I always have a safe place to retreat to. Go cool.
Morning.
Morning.
So I think it was definitely a calming experience, just going through that meditation, but I also kind of felt this turbulence, like I could feel that I really don't know what I want, that sense of confusion. And I'd just like to hear some thoughts on that because I struggle with it. A lot of times when I sit down and my mind just goes blank when I ask myself, what do I really want in my life, right? I mean, we have a job and, family and all that, but what's my higher purpose, right? So just want to hear your
I'm glad you
thoughts on
brought that up. That's one of the points I wanted to come to because it's not so easy, right? And if you stop somebody on the street outside a football game and said, what do you really want in life? It's like, I want my team to win, you know. But after that's all over, that's superficial, and it's like, okay. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up in a very frank way, Gokul. Really helpful. Radhakripa.
Yeah, I initially I really struggled because in an office environment I have like a few interesting things going on. So I was wondering, okay, I need to get over this one or that one. And then finally I started thinking, wait a minute, these are all temporarily. Then I tried to uplift myself slowly. It took me a while to reach, oh, this is what I really need. But moment I fixated on that, this is what I want. Then I said, I need to ignore other things. Then they, for fraction of a moment, at least for some time, they started disappearing. That was very kind of, encouraging. I felt like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, this is what I needed. Everything else doesn't matter. Then I start feeling lighter and a bit happier myself, even it was a temporary, phenomenon. So
that's a very interesting and helpful description, the detail that you went to. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes how a person who's fixed in consciousness is not obligated to chase all of the various seeming priorities or demands in his or her life, the desires that are arising constantly, that I have to fix this, I have to fix that. So many of them arise due to fear. If I don't do this, what will happen to me, and so forth. And so when we're able to actually understand that nothing ever happens to us, it's what's happening externally that I'm focusing on that's worrying me. And I see actually who I am. Then Krishna says, Atmanyevatmana tushta. We start feeling that sense of satisfaction or happiness. And it is a process because as I mentioned before, we have to deliberate before we can be deliberate or choose one way that we're going to focus our mind. It really takes a lot of deliberation. Deliberation, in the word deliberate, there's the word Libra. Libra, as you know, like an astrological sign, it means the scales, right? The pan scales, they're on both, one on each side, and they weigh out, weigh what's going on in your life. What do I get from investing my most valuable asset, which is my attention, in a certain direction? And when you come to the conclusion that the best investment is not necessarily these fleeting desires, these are all, I have to do them dutifully, but they're not my main thing, then I can come to a higher point of focus in my life. Yeah, thank you very much, Radhakripa. Very helpful. And there were one or two more, I think, that came in. Jay, chat.
Yeah. So Nirali mentions, I thought that I have so many worldly desires, socially connect, but when I realized that I want in the end is mental peace, just don't want turbulence in mind again with slight comment or anger or feeling of left out of what not, insecurity.
Yeah, and the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, how can there be happiness without peace? And it has to do with the mind, actually. What's the next one?
Promila says, I thought of my top priority was connecting more and having those loving get-togethers, and felt that as a glowing flower and offered it to the tree and then kept it inside. It was a beautiful experience. Thank you. It helped to know to go after one thing.
Doesn't it though? And that was my point at the beginning of the slideshow, is when you have a sense of where you're going to go, then you start to feel peaceful because this is my priority and all the other things don't grab at you as much. So you have to deliberate to be deliberate. Okay, let's show the major motion pictures that are lined up for today. We'll start with distraction and then go to the other one.
Sure. Share my screen.
Movie time.
Sometimes our mind wanders. And when we snap back to reality, we have no idea what we missed or how long we were gone. Daydreaming isn't the only thing that causes this inattention blindness. When we talk on the phone while driving, there are periods when we go blind to our environment without realizing it. So billboards, cars, kids playing, even stop signs and red lights can pass us by unnoticed. Certain things may seem harmless, but some activities just aren't safe to combine. Our brain is not wired to pay attention to more than one complex task at a time. What we're actually doing when we think we're multitasking is quickly shifting our focus from one activity to another. So while our mind is engaged in applying makeup, arguing with backseat drivers, fumbling for a water bottle, or a conversation, it's blind to the road. In fact, drivers are 4 times more likely to crash while talking on the phone, and 23 times more likely while texting. Driving can feel uneventful, but it really takes our full attention to keep the car on the road. We're surrounded by distractions that can hijack our focus. Whether we let them is up to us.
Interesting, because the wisdom literatures describe how our body's a car and we're the one driving it. And if you're not paying attention where you're going, you're much more likely. I can't give you statistics like they did specifically for texting, but you're way more likely to have an accident here or there. Accident in your life, I picked the wrong thing, or I wasn't attentive when I should have been, and so forth. So it's just interesting that the Veda, the wisdom literature, talks about how we have an amazing opportunity in the human body to be able to focus on the highest things and actually go there and develop ourselves in unusual ways. So yeah, the great accident is to not take advantage of that, to sort of get lost in the various non-important aspects that one can come across in one's life. All right, now the next video is also about this, and I made the video myself, so it also mentions just one of the many ways that one can focus the mind. The mind can get addicted to distraction. It's a non-productive zone. Distraction just means the mind is spinning, it's idling. It's not doing anything productive or helpful. We're not gaining anything. So it's helpful to have a program to come out of distraction. One of the ways to do that is to read. Learning to read a book or something deep that has philosophy in it, that has something helpful for the mind, and doing it on a regular basis helps to calm the mind, because you go line by line, and then it's a kind of meditative process, because you sit there and think about what you just read. When you do this on a regular basis, even if you commit yourself to a few lines a day or a couple of paragraphs, you'll find that you'll feel a nourishment you don't get from the distractive state of just flipping through a screen. You'll get wisdom, your mind will come alive, and you'll feel better about your life. So try reading instead of just looking at a screen. In fact, read a paper book, not one that has other information available or that has a glow coming from behind it, and see if that doesn't help you to gradually come out of this state of constant distraction.
So true.
Oh, thank you. So anyway, it just shows that there are ways easily available to us to bring the mind to more attention. And let's just hear what anybody felt about the 2 videos. Anything you extracted from there? Were there any aha moments or anything that resonated with you?
Nirali came off mute.
Yeah,
Oh,
I was gonna say I have been distracted sometimes not only phone but thoughts, and having that regular monotonous routine, like, hey, you put this switch and you do this, and so you have sometimes I don't realize, like, hey, I'm going mechanically doing things but thinking something else, and accident happened. So now I try to change that routine, in the sense I'm consciously deciding to do a different thing while so don't remember what did I just say. It's like a mechanical thing. So I try to deliberately change a little bit in the routine so don't get distracted.
That's such a good point. Even while reading a book, you can go through a line or a paragraph and then not know what you read because actually you weren't paying attention. One thing I've noticed that really helps is to designate a time when you're reading. Let everybody know I'm going to read for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, and get a do not disturb sign, put it up. Make the environment around you friendly to your concentration practice so that everyone takes it seriously, and then you take it seriously also. Radhakripa, you had a point.
Yes. So, when the first video which I saw, that was like, I was thinking it is about me, because many times we get overconfident that I can speak while I'm driving, or I can also send a tiny text. It is possible. But the price which we could pay of that could be really, really much, much bigger. So I'm just thinking constantly, it's a constant reminder that don't get into that comfortable zone that I'm a good driver. I can do both tasks at the same time while I will, survive. So it's a good reminder. Thank you for sharing that one. It's just for me as if.
Yes, and extending it on a lifetime levels, existential level, the way we're going in our life. If we become distracted in our purpose, we can lose the opportunity to actually go to where we want to go. A human life is not just random, but it's actually the wisdom literature say a tato brahma jignasa. Now that you've arrived here at this platform, as you've got this amazing machine, human body, use it properly. Don't crash it. Don't just waste it. Yeah. Anybody else?
I
Sure,
have
yes,
something to
please.
say. Yeah.
Yes.
So I grew up in a very disciplined environment at a very different time where everything was about routine. And I actually thought that greatly helped my focus and my sense of direction in life during my childhood years. But in this day and age where we live in many of us working professionals, I see that there is a lot of uncertainty, lack of clarity, and just disruptive change that we deal with on a constant basis. So my question is, how? So maybe Vash, if you could share some of your own experiences as to how do you stay, how much discipline do you put in your life? How much routine do you put in your life to really stay on focus?
Well, what a great question. And thanks for telling about the effect you felt from the discipline you had earlier in your life. Well, when I was young, I joined an ashram. And before that, I had a lot of discipline in my life because I liked sports. And I realized that in order to excel, I had to really be disciplined. I had to practice a lot more than the people I was competing against. And then, when I got into spiritual practice, it made sense to me that if you discipline your mind, you actually feel you get a result that's better. And I learned in ashram life to be regulated and also clean. And staying regulated really helps. I have, regulations when I go to sleep, when I wake up still. I can't always follow them because I travel a lot. And also sometimes when I meet people, they can only meet in the evening times and it goes later and later. So I do the best I can, but I always have that line to come back to, that I know, what's good for my body, what's good for my mind, and also what's important spiritually. I have a routine for waking up. When I wake up in the morning, I don't just, tumble out of bed, but I actually, before I even move my legs off of the bed, I have some mantras that I say. I have a prayer that I say as I put 2 feet on the floor, and it really helps me. Like one of the prayers I say is to please empower me to do my duty properly today. And when I just hear that word duty, I think like, yeah, I can do anything because I'm an instrument. I just have to do what I'm supposed to do and not become emotionally involved in it. Of course, we're always emotionally involved in one way or another, but I'm saying not become irrational, but stay in the mood of troubleshooting everything and moving forward. I also find what I just said in that video about reading is extremely helpful, especially if you read something very high-minded. That's one of the ways that we feed our intelligence. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, he gives us really interesting and helpful advice. Indriyani prayanyahur indriyebhya paramara manasastu parabudha ya budhe paratastusa. So what that is a description of the hierarchy in our body. Lowest of all are the senses. Above the senses is the mind. Above the mind is the intellect, or the buddhi. And above that is us, the non-material entity who's riding in this apparatus. So he says, strengthen the intelligence because when your intelligence becomes strong, it can help you to overcome the whimsy of the mind and also the senses. Senses can go in any direction. The mind, if it's not purified, can do whatever it wants. So reading can really help to develop the mind. And also, as I've said many times, I talk about mantra meditation a lot. The mantra meditation practice is invaluable in bringing the mind, just as the word says, mantra delivers the mind from just being lost in the wilderness. I saw Mayank was up there. Mayank, do you want to comment?
Yeah.
Yes, actually, my realization from the discussion today regarding attention and choosing one desire is something that you have spoken before in other classes, is a matter of where we place our heart. And you use that Sanskrit word called Shraddha, which I think means the same thing. So I thought I'll just share that.
Yeah, there's a verse written in one of the ancient literatures that says the body is like a chariot and the heart is the driver. In fact, the word Shraddha, which sometimes is translated as faith, Shrad means the heart and da is an active verb. It means where you place something. So what are you putting your heart into? That's where you're generally going to go. And oftentimes that impetus to put your heart into something comes after you've examined it. Is it a worthy goal to pursue? If you look at it in the long term, and then you decide, yeah, that's the best thing I could possibly do, then whatever the obstacles are, you go for it. And you don't get distracted by other lesser goals. So much to say on this topic. Thanks for such a great question, Shubha, and thank you, Mayank, for that remembrance of the word Shraddha. Okay, before we go to the next slides, and there are a few more, is that, did we get Mark's in?
Yeah, I was going to read. Mark said, make it a goal to recall every part of the route we took to drive somewhere. Every turn, every stop, even every thought. Make it a wish to drive through life and remember every moment.
Yeah, I met somebody in Los Angeles a few years ago, and he told me that a friend of his had been in the military and he had a near-death experience, or maybe he died and came back. He was revived, in other words. And my friend asked his friend, what was it like? And he said, I saw my whole life flash before my eyes, but it was not like a continuous movie. It was all at once. It was as if trillions of images presented themselves instantaneously, and I could see them all at the same time. And that just reminded me, it may not be in the exact same vein that you mentioned it, Mark, but it reminded me that everything is recorded. Whatever we're doing is recorded, and it goes into our subconscious mind. That's partly of what in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, that's what actually we become, that persona, the aggregate of all the ways that we're interacting with the world. It develops us in many ways. And we could support that easily with modern psychology and so forth, and even sociology roles and so forth that we learn. Okay, Jam, let's show a few more slides. Everyone okay so far? I need a thumbs
Yes.
up to keep going. Okay. So I noticed on my phone this little phrase that comes up every once in a while. It says searching for network, especially when I'm traveling, I'm outside my environment, searching for network. And I thought, isn't that just like the mind? It's always searching for a network. The phone wants to hook on somewhere. It's like, give me somewhere to hook on to. So the mind also is searching for network. So choose your network first, or it'll be chosen for you. I had this experience for a while when I'd walk out of my house with the phone. Somehow it was hooking onto some other network, and it wasn't mine. It was some other thing, and it wasn't helpful either. And I didn't want it to go there. So I had to rearrange my phone and tell it, no, this is where you can hook on, and here's where you can't. It's actually, as all of you know better than me, something that you can do with your phone. And so same thing with our mind. Decide which network you want your mind to be connected for, or it will wander and choose one at random. Whichever is the strongest at the time, it will choose. Okay, we'll keep rolling. There's a few more slides and we're coming to the end. So the word yoga actually means to link with your mind to the ultimate network. So this conception is that of yoga is we have an original conscious source. We all come from one source that's indescribably beautiful and fulfilling. And that source, when we fix our mind on that source, that becomes we're aware of that, and we see everything else that's emanated from that source as part of the source, part of the complete whole. That's another phrase describing it. The complete whole is complete in itself. All emanations from that complete whole are also complete in themselves. And it becomes a kind of meditation that although there's variety in the world, there's a source to all the variety. So there's a sense of unity also. So in that sense, our mind is fixed. Albert Einstein, I only have one idea. I mean, whether it's apocryphal or not, who knows, but said once his girlfriend asked him, why don't you write down all your ideas? And he said, I only have one idea. Ask me to keep a notebook to record my great ideas. I only ever had one. That goes back to the previous statement I made about there's one original conscious divine source that everything emanates from. And if we're able to connect to that network, actually everything makes sense. It all works together. And remembering also, many of you have had experience with a magnifying glass. Its photons pass through a convex lens and are centered through a single point. The shape draws them to a single point. So there's a way we can shape our lives also to make it convex. That is, convex means everything slides down into that one point. So just by degrees, you can't do it overnight, but by small degrees, if you can find ways to make your life more favorable for the focus. For instance, I mentioned waking up. If you have a deliberate way of waking up, it's yet another way that you make your life more focused. The environment is convex. It invites focus in your life. I spoke last week about simplicity and uncluttering. Get rid of things that you don't really need. I mean, so many people talk about this, and it's very popular because it actually works. When we're in an environment where there's clutter, there's so many things we don't need, or when we're thinking about many things that we don't need to think about, or listening to things we don't need to listen to, we're not inviting this focus into our life. So yoga means reshaping your life to focus on a single purposeful point. Doesn't that sound nice? It does to me. It sounds nice. You reshape everything gradually work on it. That's a project. Start working on how to make your life more favorable for focusing on the most important and most powerful point that you can be focused on. Love the picture too. Focused awareness practice, the arrow maker and the parade. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, one of the ancient wisdom literatures, a description of an arrow maker. He's making them by hand in an ancient time. And he was sitting in his shop, sanding down the arrow, and a parade came by, the king and his retinue with jugglers and elephants and his minions. And after an hour, the parade had passed, and a fellow worker who had just come back from observing the parade asked his friend, the arrow maker, "Oh, did you see the king?" And he said, "King? I didn't see any king." So he was so focused on his arrow that even though there were distractions, even though a parade went by, he didn't even notice it. So just as our mind cannot notice what's important, we can also train it to be very focused on what is important. That's the power of the mind. And just like when you focus a light, it can burn something. So similarly, just with the power of focus, we can become very productive in our lives and happier. That's called Tivrena Bhakti, actually. Tivrena means a very focused desire. And when you have that, it can burn something to ashes. And the other phrase that's on the bottom, Gyanagni Sarvakarmanam, that's Sanskrit. It comes from the Bhagavad Gita. So it's a metaphor, and it says, Agni means fire and Jnana means knowledge. So Gyanagni means the fire of knowledge. Sarva means all, and Karmana means the kind of karma I was talking about before that distracts the mind and impels us to go in directions we don't necessarily want to go or that aren't good for us. So when we have this fire of knowledge that you get from feeding your intelligence, then it burns up all the karma and you can be free. That one speaks for itself. This one does too. Bruce Lee is such an iconic figure. The successful warrior is the average man with laser-like focus. All of us have that capability. It's just a matter of honing it. And here are some symptoms of one who has a strong purpose. There's a sense of urgency. There's a reluctance to waste time. There's no zoning out. And there's a sense of optimism because you know where you're going, despite all the other distractions in the world and in your house and in your mind. And return on attention, this is part of the deliberation process. Where are you going to get the best ROA? Not ROI, return on investment, but your attention is your best and most important asset, and where you invest it is going to give you going to determine your ROA, or return on attention. So there are places you can invest it where you're going to get diminishing returns. Don't waste it. And other places where you're going to get inner happiness. And it works in relationships. You can try it today. Give full attention to somebody who's in your life. Not half, not 90%, 100%. And you just watch what happens and see how powerful your attention is. You can prove it just today. Just the next time you get an opportunity to talk to somebody, give them your full attention. And if you don't like what you're being subjected to in life, change the subject, change the channel. Your mind is a collection point. Ask yourself, what am I collecting in there? And a few focus affirmations. I review my purpose every morning. I plan each day in advance. I prioritize and work on the most important tasks first. I work single-mindedly to complete each task before moving on to another. I love hearing that last one, especially because It's so easy to get distracted and just leave things half done. Okay, we just have one or two more. We're going to skip this because we're late and we already did a little bit of work on ourselves. And similarly, I know personally of yogis who live high in the Himalayas, and they also train their minds over and over again. But when they come out of their caves, they're eager to see their comrades outside who are also practicing this meditation. So they wave to one another in a very special way. They raise their arms high in the air and they say this phrase, Hari Bol,
Hari
which
Bol.
means keep the transcendental vibration going. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh,
See you next week.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Okay, have a focused day.